I sat down with Dr. Joseph Habouche, who conducted one of the leading studies on CHS in a public hospital emergency department.
So CHS, cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, it was first described in 2004. So what ends up happening is folks who have been consuming cannabis for many years start developing these weird symptoms of nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain. But really uniquely, all of these patients had discovered that taking very hot showers helped their symptoms.
Cannabis only does good. It only does good because that's what everyone in the industry wants to think.
When you hear about weed, you never think that it can kill you. But is that the new narrative?
Yes.
If it wasn't for marijuana, we wouldn't have CHS. If it wasn't for CHS, then my son wouldn't be dead.
In 2016, she started to feel the symptoms of CHS, and in 2018, she had her first major episode.
For 14 days, all day, every day, I threw up. Nonstop. A small sip of water, I was throwing it up. I couldn't hold anything down. I went to urgent care twice, got IVs. I was, not throwing up when I had an IV in me, but then as soon as urgent care would release me, I go home and I'm throwing up. I thought I was gonna die. I was so frail. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I was a skeleton, and it was just like, when is this gonna end?
The doctors recommended that Brian abstain from consuming cannabis, and he agreed to do so for 45 days. After that, he began to smoke again and did not experience major symptoms for 6 months, but that would soon change.
October 23rd, I had woken up and Brian was sitting on the couch holding his stomach. And I said, "Bub, are you okay?" He started vomiting, so I called his doctor. And I said, "I feel like I'm watching my son slowly die." My son had lost so much weight, you could see every bone in his body. And he started grabbing his back. And he said, "My back hurts." And instantly I thought, his kidneys. So I called 911. Brian was laying on his side, facing the doorway. And he said, "Mom, I can't breathe." So I roll him over, and my son's eyes are open, and my son's not breathing. So I start doing CPR. I looked him in the eyes, and I knew he was gone.
I noticed that it's become fashionable in terms of public science education for doctors to rely on argument by analogy. What I mean is this. I notice that increasingly doctors will say with a very flippant and relaxed attitude that Xanax is a lot like alcohol.
All your nerves relax. All the signals between nerves calm down. Your body feels calm. Your muscles relax. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it's the exact same mechanism that alcohol hits. So yeah, Xanax is basically alcohol in a tablet.
I know that they're doing this because they're trying to make something completely unknown seem comprehensible to people in the audience by comparing it to something they're familiar with. The problem is, many people are very likely to respond to this line of argumentation by thinking, "Oh, well, alcohol is no problem at all. I'm familiar with alcohol. I'm not afraid of lapsing into alcoholism myself." Or, yeah, okay, fine. It's like, oh, it's like alcohol? Then it's no big deal. Then it's safe. Then it's normal. Then it's fine. They're not thinking in terms of an allegory about the effects on the nervous system. They're not thinking that from this doctor's perspective, alcohol is the drug with the highest body count in the United States of America. Alcohol kills more people than heroin in most Western countries, at least. They may not be thinking that from the doctor's perspective, alcohol might be one of the most addictive habit-forming drugs, or they may be thinking that, like alcohol, when you go through withdrawal after you've developed tolerance or addiction, you have delirium tremens, you have go into physiological shock, you're actually in danger of dying. What the doctor means by the comparison to alcohol may be something very troubling and very worrying indeed, but people in the audience are really going to find this kind of reassuring to have this drug brought down to this easy to relate to, familiar level. And of course, this is done with allegories to marijuana even more, with people presuming that marijuana represents something safe, or at least that it's a drug where all of the negative consequences are easily manageable. Now, I rely on allegories of this kind in politics and history all the time. If I'm talking to someone who really knows nothing about Buddhism, I can start to discuss and describe Buddhism in terms of its similarities to Catholicism. But pretty soon in that conversation, once I've explained a little bit about what Buddhism as a religion is like and what it's about and so on, at some point we have to move past the allegory. We have to discard it entirely and say, you know what, before I told you that Buddhism historically is similar to Catholicism in this and this way, but you know what the truth is? It's something profoundly alien, profoundly new, very difficult for you to understand or relate to, no offense. Really, it's something you shouldn't feel familiar with or that you should regard as safe. This is something you're actually quite right to feel apprehensive about and alienated from, because you really don't know the first thing about Buddhism. Then we can take the next step in the conversation. I can maybe tell you the first and the second thing also. There is a sense, both in terms of the objective chemical science and in terms of the subjective experience of what these drugs are like. There is a sense in which you would really be well advised to forget any comparison, any allegory comparing Xanax to alcohol, and you should regard it with great trepidation as something quite terrifying, exotic, and strange. Now, I emphasize here there's both an objective and a subjective side to the story. I've heard many YouTubers say that they find the effects of cocaine and the commonly prescribed methamphetamine Adderall to be identical. Now, we can get into the chemistry of what objectively are the differences between Adderall and cocaine, but then it might also be worth explaining why it is for them subjectively it seemed identical. The high produced by cocaine seemed to them exactly the same as the high produced by Adderall. I have heard people say here on YouTube that they found prescription Adderall to have exactly the same feeling, exactly the same effect as buying methamphetamine on the street as an illegal party drug. Again, interesting subjectively. And I think we could find some people who were experienced drug users who would say, no. For them, subjectively, these were two very different things, or these were 3 or 4 very different things or experiences for them in terms of how it felt, in terms of how it affected them, maybe also even specific things like how it disrupted their sleep, how it disrupted their work life, how it disrupted their sex life. So with all these caveats having been stated, I'd like to challenge you in the audience to ask yourselves, why is it that marijuana is not referred to as a sedative? Why is it that we think of this drug as something profoundly different from an addiction to sleeping pills? Why is it that we think of marijuana as something profoundly different from an addiction to painkillers? Now, the allegory is always going to be incomplete. It's always going to be in part instructive and in part misleading. But scientifically speaking, objectively, part of the effect of marijuana on your brain is sedative. Abstract. Cannabis or marijuana became legal for recreational use in Colorado in 2012, and this legislation has created both challenges and opportunities in medicine. More patients are using cannabis, and more patients are now willing to admit cannabis use than in the past. So this increases the likelihood that they will be forthcoming about drug use during medical questioning. Cannabis use may have implications during medical care, including procedural sedation. Some of you might know, if you have built up a tolerance to painkillers before you go in to have surgery, you could have the horrifying experience of going through surgery without sedation, without relief from pain, because your body was already accustomed to such a high dose of that type of drug on a daily basis. So it's important to be honest with your doctors, and the doctors may not know how to sedate you or how to provide you with anesthesia if that is the case. So the inquiry that this medical journal article is pursuing is the question of whether or not marijuana use produces a similar tolerance to sedatives, to sedation. Can you guess? Can you guess what the answer is? Medical records from 250 patients were reviewed, and researchers found that compared with people who did not regularly use cannabis, people who regularly used cannabis required an amount of sedation for endoscopic procedures that was significantly higher. It's very difficult to challenge the glamorization of drug use in our culture and in our times. I know better than anyone, I know just as well as you, that by presenting drugs as something dangerous and exciting and edgy, you can end up glamorizing them all the more, even when you're really trying to warn people this can ruin your life. Marijuana is in some ways the most storied drug in our culture right now. And if you doubt that, keep in mind, Bob Marley was one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. I think Snoop Dogg, not far behind. How many songs were on the radio, even when the drug was illegal, during my youth, constantly reiterating catchphrase, smoke weed every day, constantly glamorizing this as something rebellious, as something liberating, and in many, many cases, drug is believed to even have kind of profound philosophical significance in people's lives. I recently criticized one of the leaders of Black Lives Matter for taking that position. Wouldn't it be in some ways useful if we could bring marijuana down to earth by classifying it as and insisting on it being not recreational, not even a hallucinogen, because for most people it isn't, not psychedelic. Now there's a storied word. What if we could start to educate the public about marijuana addiction as something that really is analogous to getting hooked on sedatives, getting hooked on sleeping pills, getting hooked on painkillers? And as with all of these other forms of addiction, the telltale sign is that you build up tolerance. You need more and more of a dose in order to even get the same response.
The second biggest problem with weed for me was motivation. I struggle with mental illness. I don't know if we talked about it in this video if you're new, but those of you who know me, yeah, you know that I struggle with mental illness and depression, and motivation is like a huge thing for me. Overall, I don't really want to live. I don't really want to do things. I still had motivation, but the only motivation I had was just to get high. Like, I wouldn't even mind if I get the munchies and like I was starving and I didn't eat for 2 days. I was just like, I can't be fucked. I just want to sit here on my hammock, which is not mine even. Just want to sit on the hammock in the sun and get more high.
I'm not a man of moderation. I want to live the best I can live. I want to experience every moment. I've done drugs, man. I used to sell drugs. I know what it's all about. It's shit. It's fake. It's not real. This shit's fucking real, man. Health is real.
It's never enough. It was never, ever, ever, ever enough. Like, I never reached that balance. I was never happy enough with how I felt. I always wanted more, and it just fucking ruined me. And a lot of people say weed is not a gateway drug, and I can't say for everyone how it is, but I know that for me, whenever I feel like it's not enough, I always think about going back to Valium. Those of you who have not been following me since like Thailand wouldn't necessarily know, but I've had quite a serious addiction to Valium.
A lot of people get off street drugs and then go to fucking prescription legal drugs. And I don't think it's better, because you're still a fucking drug user. You're still an addict. You're not sober yet.
And I'm not gonna lie, I hoard pills. This is so fucked up. I still hoard pills, and I have quite a stash of Valium.
Been addicted to drugs, and I laugh because it's such an easy thing to get out of. Just stop, man. Just stop, because the more drugs you do, the more it becomes a habit. And the difference between a habit and addiction, a habit is you know it's bad for you and you can stop. Alright? An addiction is you know it's bad and you just can't stop. You're just like a roller coaster out of control. Yeah, so how I got off fucking speed, meth, marijuana, LSD, just all the recreational street drugs, and even prescription drugs, like, some of the prescription, painkillers and stims like Ritalin, etc., methylphenidate. These things I feel are as detrimental to your health, to your sanity as the street drugs. Even more so because they're legal.
And I don't want to make this video about my Valium addiction. This is not about that. I just wanted to mention that I nearly lost my life to my addiction. And every time that I smoke weed and I get this tolerance, then I think, what else can I do? How can I mix this with other things? How can I maximize this feeling? How can I, you know, get the next hit, get the next trip, get the next, I don't know. And like, even then it's not enough. It's never enough.
Fuck drugs, man. Like, I've done them, and so I can speak from experience, and they fuck up people's lives, they fuck up people's mood. Coffee's a drug. It's as bad as speed. It's as bad as meth. 99% as bad as meth. Because it's legal, and we give it to kids, and it keeps people up. And okay, people don't break into homes for coffee, I get that, but it's fucking as bad as, man. So if you do use any stimulants, coffee, tea, whatever, use them rarely, sparingly, not every week even. Ideally not even maybe a month, and just learn how to get shit done naturally, alright? Learn how to do it naturally, and that's how you get off drugs, man, is you just decide, man. You just fucking decide. You change your identity. You identify yourself as someone who's clean, lean, with clean blood, sharp minds. Fuck the haters, fuck the dealers, fuck society who says have this, have that. It's your call, man. It's your body, one shot. Drug free for life.
I have quit, as I've said many times, and I always came back to it because like the yucky black hole in my soul is like never satisfied. It's a journey, I guess. This has been such a huge part of my life, and I guess it still is in a way. I do want to clarify though that I'm not against weed, and honestly I'm not even necessarily against like harder drugs. It's just that I feel like everyone should have the ability to choose what they want to do with their lives, be it like doing drugs or even killing ourselves. Like, I think I do support that. I don't really want to live like doing drugs or even killing ourselves. Like, I think I do support that. However, I do want to show you guys that other possibilities do exist. I mean, killing yourself is not the only option.
I'm negative and I'm dark. And I want to do bad stuff. I want to hang out in this neighborhood alone. That's dangerous to hang out in this neighborhood alone right here, right? It wants to kill everything. It wants to kill me too. I hate myself. I'm trying to kill myself. I hate myself a lot. I haven't took drugs in 6 days. And for me, that's a miracle. I've been lying to everybody else to think I was sober, but I'm not. This is my 6th day. I'm never going to use again.